Hello, this is Tech Support by RD, and in this video I'm going to show you what nifty things you can do with the selection pane in Microsoft PowerPoint. Now, let me illustrate this by creating a blank presentation here, and I'm going to change the layout to a blank slide. And then I'm going to add a bunch of objects to the slide. Let's add some shapes as an example. Doesn't matter what these really are. So the position is not important. I'll just add a bunch of random objects um, here. Doesn't matter what they are. And I'm going to add a text box here with some sample text. Okay, so let's pretend that these bunch of nonsensical objects are the contents of your slide. So normally when we want to select things in PowerPoint, we just hover our mouse over the item and we click on it, and once it's selected we can move it around, scale it, or even rotate it to whatever position we want. And while it's selected, we can go to the Shape Format tab in the ribbon and choose another preset style for shape, or change its color, or apply some other effects, as well as change the arrangement of objects. So let's pile these shapes together. Now this is a worst case scenario of shapes because we can't really distinguish them. So yeah, in this scenario, this is like a worst case scenario. You have multiple objects like this. How you would typically select items by clicking on their border. Now, typically it will work, but especially if you're near the boundaries of shapes, this could be a little unwieldy to do, especially if you're dealing with a multitude of objects. And it even gets worse if you try to select multiple items. Here, I'm trying to select the square, the circle, and the triangle. However, by dragging the mouse to them, but you'll notice that I actually selected, oh yeah, it worked. However, what if I'm trying to select multiple objects? It's really inconsistent about what items will come. And for example, if I move this shape forward, I have to use the arrange buttons or keep right-clicking and changing the order that way when it comes to the arrangement of items. So this is how most people would typically do it. And it gets worse when you're dealing with multiple objects. Oh, here's one more case. This triangle is currently selected, but what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to select this arrow that's here. If I happen to click here, it sometimes works, but sometimes I end up moving other objects that aren't related, or doing things that I don't intend to do. So this is really like a worst case scenario of object management. And another scenario that might run into is you have most of your shapes or objects on your slide set up in a certain way, and you want to change one of the items in your slide, like let's say the circle, which is behind these. For example, you really want to shift the position of it. You can try moving it around, and it's snapping to objects, but sometimes you really want to align it with some certain objects, and you really need to get these arrows or triangles out of the way. So what most people would do in this case is that they're going to move these items off their location so they can see the shape better, manipulate the shape, and put these items back where they should be, which is a little time consuming. So up to this point, I'm showing you how most of us would manipulate a variety of objects in PowerPoint, especially in complex scenarios. This is where the selection pane comes in, and it's one of the most underappreciated yet most powerful features in PowerPoint. So where does the selection pane live? Well, unlike most other features in PowerPoint, it lives in the Home tab. So it's right here. It's available to you if you know where to look, and I'm going to show you where to find it. So under the Home tab in the ribbon, you go to the Editing group. Then you have three buttons in editing: Find, Replace, and Select. The selection pane belongs to Select, and we have three We have three options available to us. We'll use the selection pane. So we select the third option, and we get a nifty list of items. So what is this list? So basically, the selection pane shows us the list of items that are present on the current slide. So um, I don't know if you're aware of this, but as we're adding these objects earlier in our presentation, you'll notice that PowerPoint is now assigning names to those shapes behind the scenes. So this rectangle here is called rectangle 3. This circle thingy is called oval 4. It's actually an oval, it's not a circle. Isosceles triangle 6, this is it. Arrow right 7, star 5 points 8, text box 9, which contains our text there, and rectangle rounded corners 5. Now, in case of you're wondering why is it numbered like that, it's because we've numbered the items in that way. So the rectangle is the third thing that was added, oval is the fourth thing, the rectangle was the fifth thing that we've added, then the triangle is the sixth, and so on. If you're wondering what are objects number 2 and 1, that was the objects from the title slide when we created the presentation from scratch. So if I were to add another title slide here, let's say let's add a new slide and set it to title, or we can just use the drop down here. Let me close that. So the title gets number 1 and subtitle gets number 2. So that's why the numbering started from 3. Let's delete this slide for now and go back to our example slide. So what can we do with the selection panel or selection pane that we have right here? A lot of things actually. For one, when I select objects as I normally do, they get highlighted on the menu on the right. So when I click on this rectangle, for instance, it says rectangle 3. And when I click here, it says rectangle rounded corners 5. So it's really intuitive to select items this way. Or you can even click here and you can see them reflected here, or you can click on the name of the item and it will get selected. Another nifty trick is making adjustments to certain shapes. So for example, we can hide and show individual objects. So taking the example of this text object that I have here, this text box, with it selected, I can click the eye to make that object invisible. You'll notice that the text box is no longer selected, no longer visible on the slide rather, but it's still there. It's not deleted, and if I want to bring it back, I can just unhide it. So there we go. One more thing is let's talk about that previous scenario. We're trying to move one of the shapes and we have to move these two shapes out of the way. So the previous scenario I was talking about moving, let's say, this shape, and I need to see what's behind these and these shapes. So let's say these shapes are in the correct position, but I want to move this shape and I need to see what's behind, and I don't want to move these shapes out of the way and reposition everything. So all you have to do is to select the item and you just hide it with the eye. Let's hide this triangle with the eye button right there, and beside the item. And now we can precisely move that shape. So with those two shapes out of the way, I could just simply move that I can move that item somewhere else in relation to other objects on my slide. So let's say there it is. We like that position of the shape, and once we're done, we can bring those items back to where they are. So we do not have to hide and move things and delete things, cut and paste. I think some people cut and paste things, but sometimes when you cut and paste things, they don't return to the same location. They get offset, so it adds a lot of extra steps. So really convenient feature for us to use here. Now, another thing that the selection pane does is that this also reflects the order of objects in the slide. So in case let me just give these items different colors, so we'll be able to more easily identify them for this demonstration. So I have 5 objects. Let's ignore the text for now. You know what? Let's include the text. And as you can see, the text object goes in front of some items, but in behind others. Now, the traditional way of changing the order of the item is to use the arrange commands, either by using the shape format or the right-click menu for an item. You would like right-click this item and choose bring to front. And now that text goes all over my shapes. Or if I right-click and choose send to back, or I use this send backward or send to back command here in the ribbon, it goes behind all of the other shapes. Now, what if I want this text to be in front of this rectangle, behind this circle, and in front of this triangle at the same time? Let's just move these other shapes out of the way. Our goal is to move the text so that it's in front of this, behind this, and in front of this. Um, let's say in terms of layers. So let me reduce the size of these items, just to make our points a little simpler to grasp. Okay, so if I drag the text object, it's behind everything. Now, if I want to make it so that this text is in front of this, behind the circle, and in front of the triangle, I would have, let's say, right-click and bring to front, and then I'll just right-click and bring to, no, I want this to be in the back, and I want this circle to be in the front. So the text is in front of the rectangle, behind the circle, in front of the triangle. But now let's add this star to the mix. Right now the star is behind um, the star is behind the text, but it's in front of the rectangle. What if I want this star to be um, behind that rectangle as well? I can right click and choose send to back or just send backward. Sometimes when I click the buttons send backward or bring forward, you'll notice that it says, why is it not doing anything? It's like nothing is happening when I click the button multiple times. I hope you're paying attention to the selection pane while I'm manipulating the order of these objects, because it turns out that our selection pane is not only for selecting the items in our slide, it lists the exact order in which these objects will appear when placed on top of one another. So, in essence, it shows you the exact arrangement of items on your slide. So let me take this star out for now. You'll notice that our rectangle is at the bottom entry of the list, meaning that this rectangle will go behind every single other item in the list because it's in the very back of the arrangement. Then the next shape in the list higher up is the triangle, then this rectangle, then the star, then the arrow, then our text box. And since our text box is higher than this triangle and the square as well, by extension, the text box appears on top of these two shapes. However, since our oval is at the topmost of the stack, it appears in front of the text. So some of the words in our text box got cut off. So yes, this is what's really happening behind the scenes. And sometimes when you use the send backward and bring forward commands, you might think that nothing is happening. But with the selection pane visible, we can really clearly see what's going on as we manipulate these objects in our slide. We're really changing their arrangement. It's not that obvious because the arrangement pertains to objects that are not necessarily on top of one another. Yeah, so that's what the selection pane is for. And another feature of the selection pane is it makes it easier to select different groups of objects. So to group objects in PowerPoint, we typically select the items that we want to group together, like these bunch of nonsensical objects. Right-click, I don't want to move my mouse while right-clicking. Right-click and choose group and group, groups the items together. Let's group these three shapes in a group. Let's right-click on them, group, and group. So you may have noticed that when I click on a group, all of the items move at once. And if I want to manipulate an item in a group, I'll just click the item again, making this double click. And what if I want to move the rest of the items again? No, that doesn't work. It moves all of the items. I have to click on the border. So that's kind of how groups work. But you'll notice on our selection pane, when you group items together, it consolidates them into these like nested folders of some sort. So when I can even collapse and expand the groups here. So I can select a certain group, move the items, And if I select a single item, I can only manipulate that item only. And I can go back to selecting the group and move it around. However, our visibility with that eye button that we have there for each item, it also applies to groups as well. So if we want to just make a bunch of items disappear at once, click the eye, the items vanish, and we can just manipulate our other items as well that way. Let's bring back that group of shapes that we have from earlier. Okay, so that's grouping. So when we group items, we're able to know which items are available, and we can toggle the visibility of certain of the individual items or the entire group as a whole. I just collapsed that by mistake. Oh, and one more feature. Let's say that these tree shapes, let's say we want them to be here, and we don't want these shapes to move anywhere else on our slide. Probably we're using the slide as a template, and we don't want these shapes to move. With that lock button beside the group or an item, we can lock its position on a page, and you'll notice that when it's locked, we can still pick that item, but we can't move their position. We still get the boxes, but we can't move their position. So we can move, let's say, our other items around the slide. Undo that. I can move this, and I will be able to select this, but I'm not able to get it off the page. Really great if you have elements that belong to a certain spot on the page, and you want to be certain that they cannot be moved around accidentally. So that's visibility and locking of objects on the page. And finally, there are shortcut buttons for showing all the items on the slide or objects, and you can hide all the objects if you want to make certain items visible as you go as well. Now, another underrated feature of the selection pane is that you might think that these names are randomly generated and assigned by Excel as you edit, but you can change these names to whatever you want. So let's say I want to change this oval to another name. I just double click on the entry on the name, and I'll type my own name. So I'll call this orange oval. Okay, and this text box, I'll call this quick brown fox text. And this isosceles triangle, I'll just rename it to gray triangle. And here I'll rename rectangle tree to dark blue rectangle. This arrow. We'll call this okay, yellow arrow. And this star, I'll call this a green star. Okay, I misspelled that one. I'll just double click again. And rectangle here, I'll call this a light blue rounded rectangle. So we can really give really easy descriptions for these items here in the selection pane, not just rely on the default names, which makes it a breeze when we're dealing with these objects, what they are. And as you'll see in a moment, these names are also reflected in another feature that most of us would like to use in PowerPoint as well. Now, we can not only give names to individual objects, but we can also give names to groups. So I can double-click on a group name, hopefully without collapsing it, and I'll type, let's say, okay, 4 objects with text. No, I'll call this tree objects, and let's call it 4 objects to make things simple for us. And we'll call this group of tree items tree objects. You can give these things your individual names. So right now we have 2 groups, a group of 4 objects and a group of 3 objects, and we have descriptions for each of our items. Now, why did we go through the effort of naming these items? Well, let me unlock this group that we've just locked previously for the next, and I think the final part of the demo here, the animation pane. One of the hallmark things that we do in PowerPoint is animations. And the traditional way of animations is we go to the Animations tab in the ribbon, we select an object we want to apply an animation to, and we select a particular animation. Let's say a fade animation for that group that we selected. Now, most of us know that we can use the animation pane to view which animations are on the objects. And this now answers the question that some of us might have wondered, where are the names of these items coming from? It comes from the selection pane. See? So the four objects, I think I applied a transition to the four objects group. I placed a fade effect, so it says four objects, and that name is being pulled from the selection pane. Now, if I just want to apply a transition to a single object here, let's say the gray triangle, I want to make it spin. Oh, you have to ungroup items. Group items will always animate together. That's something new you'll have to learn and keep in mind. So yeah, I'm you have to ungroup objects if you want to animate them individually. You have to group objects if you have to want them to have the same exact animation or want them to behave as one single object. Okay, so that's something new we have to learn every now and then. Let's ungroup these three objects. So right click, group, ungroup, and now they're separated into their constituent items here. And let's say the screen star, I want it to zoom, and I want this blue rounded rectangle to have a wheel effect, and I want this yellow arrow to have a float in. I'm just choosing random animations for the purposes of illustration here. Go back to our animation pane. By the way, if you're using a newer version of PowerPoint, the multiple panes can be browsed as tabs on the side. If you have an older version of PowerPoint, you'll have to call up these panes manually by using the buttons that we explained earlier. Now, going back to topic, we have the animation pane showing us the animations available to us. Let me I can adjust the timing of the animations here if I want, or duration. I can move them around as I normally do. I can make them offset. I can make precise adjustments here to my animations. I can even rearrange them if I like. So we can even apply various timings if we like. Let's make the first transition start on click. Adjust the timing and play. Okay, we'll play from the beginning here. So let's preview here. So those animations play precisely according to our specifications here and the things we manipulate. And now we can see that by naming these objects in the selection pane first before applying animations, it makes it easier to distinguish among the different items that are on our slide instead of relying on the default names. So yeah, this is a demonstration of the selection pane in PowerPoint, what you can do with it, what happens when you group objects, how you can toggle visibility when you're moving objects around, and also answering one of the age-old questions we probably never even wondered at some point in our lives. Where do the names of the objects that are being animated in our animation pane come from? They come from the selection pane. And yes, we can rename items, rearrange them in any order we want, and do anything that we want with it. I hope this demonstration of the selection pane is helpful, and I hope this helps you in making more efficient use of designing very complex slides in PowerPoint, especially dealing with multitudes of animations or continuous animations as well. Hope this tip is helpful, and I appreciate your time sticking around. Thanks for watching. Bye.